Tucked away in the South China Sea is a stretch of coastline so rugged and so notorious for vanishing travelers that locals have given it a rather bleak nickname, the Bermuda Triangle of China. This is the Sai Kung Peninsula. In June 2016, a 45-year-old hiker named Zhang arrived here to tackle a well-known path called the McLehose Trail. Zhang was highly experienced. He packed his gear, snapped a quick landscape photo for his friends online, and began his ascent. But shortly after stepping onto the trail, Zhang disappeared. When he failed to return home that evening, his wife contacted the authorities to report him missing. The Hong Kong police quickly mobilized a massive multi-day rescue operation. Dozens of search and rescue personnel combed through the immediate wilderness, looking for any trace of him along his planned route. Days later, a group of hikers spotted Zhang alive, but his location defied the timeline of a standard search. He was standing 600 meters from his parked car. An experienced hiker with top-tier gear doesn't get dangerously lost within a 600-meter radius. And more confusingly, a massive police search team doesn't repeatedly sweep that exact same radius and fail to spot a grown man shouting for help. To piece together what happened, we have to look at the beginning of Zhang's hike. Just minutes into his trek, under a perfectly clear sky, a severe thunderstorm materialized directly overhead. Zhang braced for a downpour, but the storm vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving the sky completely clear once again. Pushing forward up a steep incline, he was suddenly hit by a suffocating wave of heat. The air grew so hot it burned his lungs, causing extreme chest congestion. Struggling to breathe, Zhang collapsed onto the trail and passed out. When he finally opened his eyes, he was staring up at a pitch-black sky. He checked the time. It was 8:30 p.m. He had been lying unconscious in the dirt for exactly 12 hours. The forest had fallen into an absolute unnatural silence. When Zhang reached into his backpack to call for help, he realized his phone, his water bottle, and all his gear were gone. Panicking, he grabbed his flashlight and frantically tried to retrace his steps down the mountain to his car. However, the terrain didn't match his memory. The loud river he had walked beside earlier that morning was nowhere to be found. The shift in his surroundings was absolute. Between the instant disappearance of the storm and the sudden silence of the woods, the environment itself appeared to have been swapped for an unfamiliar landscape. Wandering through the dark, he stumbled upon a massive, completely calm lake. He knew the map of this area by heart. There was a river near his trail, but absolutely no lake. Out of the corner of his eye, Zhang spotted a person standing on the opposite shore. Desperate, he shouted for help and sprinted toward them, but the stranger immediately turned and bolted deep into the woods. Zhang chased the person into the tree line until the figure finally stopped. But as Zhang approached, the entity's upper body swiveled to face him while its feet remained pointing entirely forward. It had no facial features, just two glowing orbs staring back at him. Terrified, Zhang turned and ran. This began a very rapid, disorienting cycle. He would sprint away from the shadow figure in broad daylight, only to break through the tree line and suddenly find himself under the pitch-black midnight sky. During one of these erratic shifts in scenery, he emerged into a clearing containing a graveyard. He touched the physical stones, clearing away the overgrown brush. Every single date carved into the markers indicated the graves were over 200 years old. Eventually, exhausted and hallucinating from lack of water, the sun rose. Zhang heard the faint sound of a stream. He followed the water down into a valley and collapsed directly in front of 3 normal hikers, who immediately called for rescue. Zhang had been walking continuously for days, crossing unmapped lakes, ancient cemeteries, and shifting time zones. Yet, the coordinates where those hikers found him proved he had barely moved from his starting point. Once admitted to the hospital, doctors examined Zhang and quickly diagnosed him with severe dehydration. In their official medical view, the trauma of heat stroke had caused an intense, prolonged psychological hallucination. But Zhang pointed out a glaring flaw in that theory. All of his gear, including his water bottles, disappeared on day 1. If the massive lake he drank from to survive was just a hallucination, he would have died of thirst long before the hikers found him. This map illustrates the central paradox of the police search. Here is Zhang's exact location, well within the immediate 600-meter radius where the police concentrated their search grids. Over the course of the manhunt, multiple rescue teams walked directly over Zhang's coordinates. Zhang was actively shouting for help in the exact same physical space where police were looking for him, yet neither party ever saw or heard the other. You can attribute glowing eyes and shifting landscapes to a heat-induced mental break, but an internal hallucination cannot explain how highly trained rescue workers experienced a physical, geographical blind spot. People living in the surrounding region aren't surprised by the police's failure. They refer to this specific patch of wilderness as the Sai Kung area, a localized spatial anomaly known for swallowing experienced hikers into an invisible labyrinth. Reflecting on his survival, Zhang later stated he didn't find his way out by navigating. He believes the environment only let him go the moment he collapsed in the dirt, completely surrendered his will to live, and accepted his death. We map our trails and track our steps, assuming the ground beneath us follows strict, unchanging rules. But whether the Macleho's trail induces severe psychological breaks or actually houses a fold in physical space, it proves there are still dense pockets of the earth that defy human logic.